So the April 8th, 2024 total solar eclipse across North America has come and gone, and now it's our time to edit our photos that we practice so hard to capture. But how do you go from this to this? I'll show you the mistakes that I made on my wide angle shots and how I corrected it, so stay tuned. Hi, I'm Alan Lebrecht, and I'm an adventure, landscape, and nature photographer in upstate New York. This channel documents my adventures hiking, backpacking, canoeing, and camping in order to get unique landscape and nature photos. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please be sure to subscribe below and click the notification bell for future video uploads. No matter how much we practice before the total solar eclipse, it's inevitable that mistakes are going to be made. Let's face it. Most of us don't chase solar eclipses all the time, so I haven't had much practice, and this is probably going to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience, although going on a trip to Australia in 2028 might be fun. But the mistakes that I made with my wide-angle shots were because I made a last-minute decision to shoot without a filter. So I only practiced with the telephoto zoom lens to get my close-up shots of the sun, which is really what I was looking to do in the first place, but I still wanted to be able to compose a composite image of the landscape with the eclipse occurring. The one wide angle shot that came out with the proper exposure is the one where the sun was totally blocked by the moon. So therefore the landscape was perfectly exposed and the shot of totality was almost what I wanted it to look like. So how can I correct this mistake? We'll jump in and start editing this image, and I'll show you how I went from this to this composite image of the stages of each phase of the sun during the eclipse. So to begin our composite image, the first thing we have to do is we have to go through and look at all of the images that we took. I've got 633 photos that I took, so obviously we're not including all of those. So what I want to do is I want to identify how many images of the sun, the actual eclipse, before totality that I want to show in my composite image and how many after. Since all of the photos that I took with my wide angle camera that was down lower and taking shots to the actual landscape itself all tended to blow out like this. So you can see that the landscape isn't exposed properly. I had put the camera in aperture priority mode, but yet it still didn't darken down the sun enough. So the sun is blown out and the landscape is too dark. So it wasn't until I got home that I realized that all of these images were blown out and overexposed in the sun. So my goal was always to create a composite image of showing the sun traversing through the sky with the moon crossing over the face of the sun during the whole process. So I have one photo that occurred during totality where the sun blocked out all of the light, the camera exposed properly for the environment, so you can see that the landscape is actually exposed properly here. I like the lighting in the environment. If we have to pull up some of the exposure a little bit to brighten it up a little bit, we can do that. I also like the exposure of the sun. You can actually see the moon in front of the sun here in this image with the corona around it. However, there's so much light pouring around the moon that what we're going to do is we're actually going to paint the moon back in as a dot into the center of the corona. That's the way I want my image to look, so that's how I'm going to be doing it during this tutorial. I've already gone through and identified 7 images that I want to show beginning the eclipse before totality and 7 images after. So I've gone through Lightroom, I've highlighted the different phases of the sun with the moon crossing in front of it that I want to include as the beginning part. And then the 7 phases of the eclipse as the moon is going beyond the sun at this point, and that's what we'll include on the backside. Now, the other thing I wanted to make sure that I did was I want to make sure that I'm including the starting point, so I know where in the sky the sun was at the beginning of the eclipse, or as close to the time of the beginning of the eclipse as possible, and the end of the eclipse, or when the eclipse ended, before it got totally clouded in. So I've gone through and selected those 2 images. So this obviously is the beginning time. I didn't apparently set the clock back on my camera, so it's showing 108, but here in upstate New York in the Adirondack Mountains, it was actually 208 when I took this photo. And then the eclipse ended at 4:28:56, before the clouds started coming in and getting thick to the point where I really couldn't capture the final piece of the eclipse series, but close enough. This was the final image that I was able to capture through the clouds. Some of the images are a little hazy just because of that, but that's what was given to me. So those are the images that I'm going to use. I'm not going to try to doctor them up or try to get rid of that haze. That's the way the eclipse looked at that time. So now that I've got my photos selected, I've got my base image that I want to put the composite or build the composite off of, and then I've got my starting point, I've got my ending point, and then I also have a few images that I did take with the wide angle camera where I put the lens on first, just to see how it was going to look. To me, it appeared to be too dark. It didn't really work for me. However, this does give me a baseline to show the size of the sun, based on the 16 millimeters, I think, or 17 millimeters that I was shooting at, as wide angle as I could, in that location. The camera never moved from that spot. So this is going to be our baseline for what we're going to try to shrink our sun down to based on our telephoto lens images. So I'm going to take all of these images, we're going to move them over as layers into Photoshop, and then we'll bring you back and I'll show you how we go about all the steps in creating the composite image. So now that we've got all of our layers over into Photoshop, our next step is to take our base layer, which I've got highlighted here, and determine where the starting and the ending points are going to be for the sun. And then we'll have to add a layer to draw a line between those 2 points to determine where the sun phases will go on that line as we approach totality, and then as we leave totality and go to the end of the eclipse. So I've got all of our layers aligned already. I've already gone through the steps of taking all of the images and putting them in order just to save time here. But I've just put the base layer that we're looking at here as our base. So remember, we took a image that showed where the sun started and where it ended. So that's layer 1 and layer 2. So what we'll do now is we'll turn those on. Now, obviously, by turning those layers on, you can't see the base image anymore, but what I'm going to show you is by holding down my shift key, I'm going to highlight layer 1 and layer 2, and then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to turn those layers to lighten layers. What that's going to do is that's going to allow the highlights to actually shine through only, and all of the midtones and darks will dissolve away, and you'll see that what we're left with is the beginning point, our totality sun, and our ending point. So what we'll do is we'll draw a line between the starting point and the ending point of the solar eclipse. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change my ink color to, say, I don't know, let's choose like magenta, this sort of pinkish color, so it'll be easy to see. Make sure we've got our brush size up to around 50. And then what we do is we select where we think the center point for the sun is on our starting point. And holding the shift key, we'll put a point, or we'll draw a point where the end should be, and we now have a magenta line between the starting point of the eclipse and the ending point of the eclipse, with the totality being right on the line. It doesn't have to be exact. We'll align some of these as we're going through, but it gives you a general idea as to where we're going to need to draw that line. You can turn off those two layers for the starting and ending point, and we can now see our magenta line going across. So for the next phase of this edit, we need to take the line that we've drawn with the starting point, the ending point, and we've got totality in the middle, and figure out how to divide these up into 7 equal lines, so we know exactly where to place each of the sun phases in our composite. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my ruler, and I'm going to pull out the ruler. I'm going to hold my Control key down on my Mac because this wants to snap to the grid, and I'm going to put that right in the center of totality. So I'm going to rename this layer to diagonal. And I've added another layer here because as I'm moving grid lines into the image, I need to select the move tool and make sure that if I need to adjust the grid lines, I can do that. So what I'm going to do is, you know what, let's do this. Let's zoom in on that line. That will make things a little easier here as far as setting up the actual guidelines and divisions. So between here and here, I need to be able to draw or pull out 6 grid lines where I'm going to want 6 of the phases of the sun to fall, including this one, which would be my 7th. And the same thing on this side. So we'll grab a grid line. And we'll pop it. We just need to figure out how to get 6 in here. So we got 1, 2. Okay, so I think that's relatively good. Let's do the other side. All right, so now we've got our guidelines representing each of the phases of where the sun should fall on that line as it approaches totality. So the next step is we can now remove this layer. So the next step will be to size all of our suns to be the same size as this one. So this is the sun image that was taken with the filter on. So you can see here is the sun image. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take all of our solar eclipse sun phases that we took with our telephoto lens, and we're going to shrink them down to approximately that size of the sun. So the next step that we're going to do is we're going to hide all these layers. We're now going to select all of our sun telephoto zoom sun images, and we're going to highlight all of those except for this last one. This last one is the full image of the sun that I took at the very beginning of the solar eclipse. So you're going to want one full-size image of the sun, and then what we're going to do is we're going to select that one. No, I'm sorry. We're going to select the top one, and all of the images, or all of the other phases other than the full-size image of the sun here, and we're going to convert that over into what we call a difference. And then we're going to show this one is visible, and then we're going to scroll up. We're going to come up with this really interesting pattern with all of the different phases. I've seen images on YouTube where people have actually kept that as an image, which is kind of cool. But all we're trying to do here on this image is we're going to start by making all of these not visible any longer, except for the top, this image, and the bottom, the actual full-size sun image. All we're trying to do in this process is we're trying to align all of our suns so that we can do a mass shrink of all of the suns, and then we can start moving them around and putting them on the line. So we've got this image highlighted. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the arrow key to move that up and down to make sure that it's aligned. And then I'm going to go to the next image. I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to make sure that that is aligned by using my arrow keys, and you'll see that the image, or the sun's edge, is lining up properly. We'll go to the next one. And so on and so forth. So I'm going to speed up this process so that you don't have to watch me as I'm going through each of these individual steps. Once they're all aligned, we'll come back on, and then I'll show you how you can shrink all of the sun phases down to the size of the one that was taken with the wide angle lens filter on. Okay, now that we've lined up all of the sun phases, we can change all of the sun phases back to normal instead of difference, so we'll put them back to normal. And I did move one image, one phase up. I'll move it back down. All right, now the next step. It doesn't look like it sent everything back, so let's try that again. I'm going to convert these all back to normal. Okay. So now the next step is going to be to shrink all of the sun phase instances or shots down to be the size of the image that was filtered. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to highlight all the images that we want to shrink down, and then I'm going to zoom back out. I'm going to pull up the filtered solar eclipse image. I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to move this so that it's out of the way of the grid. And you can see here's our suns. So now we can highlight all of the instances of the solar eclipse phases. And holding the Option key, we'll start to shrink all of, I'm going to grab this handle, and we're going to shrink all of these sun instances down. And I'm going to drag them all over to here, and we'll zoom in. And we'll keep shrinking the sun instances. Okay, and now that's done. Now I know it's not exact, but it's close enough for what we're trying to do here. So next step is we can hide the solar eclipse image from before, and let's bring back our base image. And what we're going to do is we're going to start pulling our sun phases over. So I'm going to move this to the center, and starting with the top layer. This is the first image that was shot, and this, oops, we got to bring back our diagonal line. Let's show diagonal. So now we brought back the diagonal line. So now what we're going to do is we're going to approximate where the sun needs to be here on this first line. So we'll pop that there. Then we'll grab the second image and we'll bring that over to here. And we'll just keep doing that until we run out of images of the sun. Now, you may be asking yourself, as I'm dropping these in here, hey Alan, these images of the sun were on black, right? So this sky that we're looking at here, it's almost more of like a twilight blue. So what do we do in the instance where we've got these boxes that are showing up with where it's black? So the next step is we need to, after we've aligned all of these up, is to just double check and see, do these pretty much fall in line? We'll have an opportunity to be able to adjust them again. But for now, I'm going to take the guides and clear those. And now you can really see where all of the sun images are in a line. This one looks like it might be a little out. Let's just pull that one down, pull that one down. So we're just making modifications here just to even out things so that they look a little better. And then the other thing we can do also is we can also highlight all of the sun images by holding the shift key, and we can nudge them all up if they're not exactly in line with totality. And I think that looks pretty good right there. So I think we're in good shape as far as the alignment of the suns. So now, how do we get rid of the black boxes? So what I've done is I've highlighted all of the sun phases that we want to have included. And now what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the layer mode and we're going to click on lighten. And voila. No more black boxes. So if you look, we'll come down here to the diagonal, we'll remove the diagonal, and now we have an image with all of the phases of the solar eclipse that line up with totality. So there's some minor tweaks that I might have to do to the image here. I might come in here and just select certain phases and move them down or up. Might require a little more finesse with maybe the arrow keys, but you get the general gist of the idea. Is this gives you an opportunity to be able to line up all of the sun phases that maybe, like me, you mistakenly didn't capture in your landscape wide angle shots, and now you have an opportunity to be able to actually get some clear multiple phases of the solar eclipse right up to totality and afterwards in your composition. So the final step here, and this was a recommendation from a friend and mentor of mine, Carl Heilman, who said that one of the things you can do in order to make the totality image a little cleaner, because the corona tends to overtake the moon, is to what we call put a drop of black in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my elliptical tool. So what we can do is we can zoom in on the image, and what I want to try to do is I want to get a moon image, or a circle about the same size as the moon that we can overlay the corona image with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a layer. We'll drag this layer down to just above the totality image, and I'm going to call this layer moon. We'll just call it moon. And I'm going to grab my elliptical tool, and clicking on the center, I'm going to hold the shift and option key and start pulling out. This is going to lock that elliptical tool so that I'm not creating an ellipse. See, I can pull out, pull in, it's not moving. So if I hold the shift and option key, it's allowing me to create an ellipse or a circle about the size of the moon based on what I'm seeing here. Then the next step is using black ink. I'm going to use the paint bucket tool. I'm going to fill this with black. And then we can deselect. And that's it. So now what we've done is we've created a composite image that shows the phases of the eclipse traversing across the sky, and we've improved on the corona photo by making the Earth side of the moon darker and very clear, with the corona actually shining outside of the image. I hope that was helpful to you. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have, or if you've got other ways of being able to create the grid, for example, or putting the grid lines in to keep the image separation without having to eyeball it a little easier. I'm always open to new thoughts and ideas. So I appreciate you stopping by the video. And if you like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing and hit the bell notification for future videos. Thanks.